Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to Final Trade. We're going to take a look at draft box performance versus set box performance. I had promised to do this every 6 months. It's marked on the calendar from here to forever, and the last time we did it was March. So we're going to update these data and see how they look. So first of all, I've added Phyrexia and March in the Machine down to the bottom. Of course, compound annual growth rate numbers will not be meaningful for very, very short time periods. That's why I do not have Lord of the Rings, Commander Masters, and Wilds of Eldraine on here. This column is release date. I choose that as the essentially the date on which you would have purchased this theoretical investment. And so you have to pick some kind of date. We don't always get good dates for when something is out of print. We often get squishy dates, if anything at all. We might take kind of a midpoint. We might even say something like 3 months after release when you expect the TCG expansion lifecycle to have driven down the value of something. So I just use release date because it is a conservative worst case number, and we always know what the release date was. For the initial price, I use the wholesale price at release. And so you can see some of these for the draft boxes are $86, and that's before the standard draft price was increased to $95 in the summer of 2022. Same over here for set boxes, originally $90 and then going to $102 later for the non-premium prices. And then I've just gone out today on TCG Player and I've taken the market prices of all of these products and filled them in here. I take market price because, well, it's easy to always get a data point. If we just take the market price on TCG Player, I don't go out and try to compare, is eBay lower, is some other place lower? I use something that I can consistently get data for into the future so that we can compare these data over time also. And then I've calculated the compound annual growth rate. So assuming you had purchased your boxes of Zendikar Rising Draft at $86 on release date, and they have fallen to $84 today, now 3 years after release, then your compound annual growth rate would have been a negative 0.8%. And compound annual growth rate is what is the average annual growth percentage over the entire course of the investment. It is a compounding percentage. And so then I've come into this column and I've said which compound annual growth rate is higher, which product has done better, draft boxes or set boxes. It simply says which one is higher, and then it says for the higher one, how much is it higher by? So this is a simple subtraction. So 5.9 minus 0.8, negative 0.8 is 6.7. So how much higher is, in this case, the set box than the draft box on compound annual growth rate performance? And something you might notice is all the red boxes, I just have these conditionally formatted to turn red if the performance has been negative, if essentially they have fallen from wholesale price since release. And of course, we do expect a little bit of this sometimes. Just from the TCG expansion lifecycle, we would expect a weak product to do this, but the reality of the Magic market over the last 18 to 24 months has been overprinting, too many releases, too many products, and dissatisfied customers. So the market has been very weak, and as I keep saying, I continue to expect it to remain weak for a while to come. But we see that most products are selling today below their original wholesale prices. Even products that have experienced increases in their wholesale prices over their lifetimes, they are still low. And so the conclusions right now are that set boxes are mostly doing better than draft boxes. For most expansions in which there is a set box and a draft box, the set box is doing better, and in some of these by pretty healthy amounts. And then you have the couple for which draft boxes are doing better also. Now, there's a lot of things to unpack, stuff to talk about with this. I mentioned already compound annual growth rate. That isn't a sensible calculation on very short timelines. And there are others that I have listed under the caveats here. Small number of expansions so far. Well, what does that really mean? It means that if we're trying to determine, which was the whole genesis of this, what will do better as an investment in the long term, draft boxes or set boxes, We only have these approximately 12 or 15 expansions so far that have had both draft and set boxes. So we haven't seen a lot of what may happen. If we look back at this in 10 years, there will probably be 60, 70 more expansions that have both boxes. So right now, our data set is kind of limited. Time out of print, what that means is the TCG expansion lifecycle tells us that when a product goes out of print, the supply of it begins to slowly tighten up as card stores can no longer get resupplies from distribution. They sell out of their inventory, the product becomes harder to get, more people then have to go to the secondary market, competition increases, and over time prices start to go up. Now, only these 4 expansions highlighted in blue are out of print. It would have been 4 more, except WotC gave them a reprieve by increasing the standard rotation cycle from 2 years to 3 years. So essentially, Midnight Hunt, Crimson Vow, Kamigawa, and Streets of New Capenna are under threat of being reprinted if the market gets some wind in its sails and actually starts to rise. So we won't get an idea of how these 4 perform out of print for at least a year. And we can expect them to go out of print probably around May of 2024. But again, the supply has to tighten up enough that prices can begin to rise. And as we've seen with the original set that's gone out of print, Zendikar, Kaldheim, Strixhaven, and AFR, well, Strixhaven and AFR look like there's still just tremendous volume of inventory out in the secondary market. Zendikar and Kaldheim have somewhat tightened up since they've gone out of print. At least the set boxes are in the green. The draft boxes of Kaldheim are in the green. And at least Zendikar draft boxes aren't too far red. But I've said before, and I'll probably say it many more times, I think Zendikar Rising Draft is one of the most mispriced things in the market right now. I think it should be worth a lot more. But essentially, with not many sets out of print, not many allowed to start rising and realizing what their prices might look like once the inventory has tightened up, well, we just can't get good long-term insights into the draft versus set comparison. Number 5 down there is there will not be a single winner. Yes, we expect that sometimes their draft boxes will do better, sometimes set boxes will do better. Famously, Baldur's Gate draft boxes are much better engineered than set boxes, and at wholesale they had the same price because there was a large difference in the number of cards in the box. But in the long term, I definitely expect Baldur's Gate draft boxes to outperform set. Now, for most expansions, personally, I expect set boxes to outperform. That's been my consistent position. It's that WotC puts more mythics, more rares in set boxes. They have the list slot lottery ticket in set boxes. You have different treatments, different alternate arts that are not available in draft boxes. You sometimes have certain commander cards that are not available in draft boxes. And it all makes sense because essentially WotC wants you to buy set boxes instead of draft boxes because there's less cardboard and it sells for more. The margins are much better for WotC. So they, in my opinion, will continue to do what it takes to try to push you more and more towards set boxes, which probably will make them good long-term investments. Now, the counter argument is something I've called the draft experience premium, which is the idea that in the future, people will say, hey, remember Zendikar Rising and how great the draft experience was. Let's buy a box and then, we can enjoy a couple of drafts of it with that box. And yes, I think that happens, definitely. There's no doubt that it does happen. But to the extent that that can push prices long term, I've always been skeptical because essentially every other draft box acts as a close substitute to whatever specific draft box you're talking about. And so you might say, well, I loved Zendikar Rising Draft, but in a hypothetical future, it's $1,000 a box. And maybe you think Kaldheim Draft was just about as good, and let's say in the same hypothetical future, it's only $200 a box. Well, you would substitute and you'd buy Kaldheim instead. And so there's plenty of competition for that. It's why I've never fully jumped on board with that being enough to pool draft boxes ahead of set boxes in the long term. I skipped over there, number 4, Cruel Summer, Magic Bear Market, Soft Economy, and we might add to that now Project Booster Fund Fallout. Essentially, it's that none of these products has really existed in a good, strong, long-term bull market yet. And I think until we see a strong bull market that really peels back and says, how many boxes of these things actually still exist? Until you get a lot of new money flowing in and a lot of people chasing these things, maybe a lot of that draft nostalgia buying, and you start to get better price discovery from higher volume of sales, you won't really know where these prices will go. And so, again, we've been in a bad magic market for 18 to 24 months now. It's probably going to persist for at least another 6 months, and even that's probably being generous. And so we won't get a good insight until we've had a decent amount of time for boxes like Zendikar Rising to get whittled down in the market by buyers who are overly enthusiastic and a market that is maybe burning a little too hot. Number 6 there, possible long-term effects aren't yet in place. Specifically, that's the Draft Experience Premium, because I don't think anybody right now is itching to go back and re-experience the Kamigawa or Midnight Hunt draft environments. Not yet. There's plenty of new draft experiences to be had. There's tons of old ones out there to have also, and it'll probably just take time before anyone gets nostalgia enough for any of these in specific. And so what I would say is it's an interesting question. It's something that we continue to wonder, but we don't really have any good insight yet based on the data here. And I think 6 months from now, when I come back and look at this again in March of 2024, we may start to get some good insight, at least on these first 4 out-of-print sets. Hopefully by then, the supply has tightened up enough that we can kind of get a look at what those are looking like long-term. So that's it, guys. We'll continue to look at these every 6 months going forward until we have a good idea of what the winner is. And, WotC has not really settled on what should be in a set box. They keep changing it set to set. They keep messing around with the list, the content of the list. Some people will say that WotC messes around with the hit rate of the list. There was an expansion recently where people swore up and down that rares and mythics from the list were much more common. I don't know. I don't think anyone has any actual data on that except WotC, and they're not going to say. But there is a possibility that set boxes themselves begin to get kind of watered down and become less popular. This is similar to the kind of 3 periods of life of collector boxes video that I did a few weeks ago. So we may see that in the future, and that would complicate analysis also if we thought we had distinct periods of set boxes, some of which had been better constructed than others. Let me know what you think, guys. Thanks to everyone who makes this content possible, especially my supporters on Patreon. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and join me on Final Trade.